Alrighty, folks, I think we can go ahead and get started. So if y'all don't know me yet already, I am Neha Carr. I use she, her pronouns. I am based out of Mooresville, North Carolina, so like smack dab in the triangle. And I am the chapter's new digital organizer. I've been here working since November, and this is my first webinar that I'm doing for the chapter, and I'm really excited that all of y'all are here today. We're going to get started now. We have Erin Carey, who is our Deputy Director of the North Carolina Sierra Club, and Brooks Rainey, who is the Senior Attorney and Legislative Counsel at SELC, Southern Environmental Law Center. We're super excited to have them today to talk through um, today's webinar. As you know already, we will be talking about how the state has systematically retreated from meaningful environmental regulation. And at the end, we'll talk about what you can do to help. You'll learn about how the NC legislature has worked to strip the governor of regulatory power, install industry loyalists onto key committees charged with protecting our health and environment, specifically with the EMC, who has recently proposed really bad, terrible rules for regulating 1,4-dioxane and discharges that are currently open for public comment. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Brooks.
And is my presentation, can they see it? There it is.
Oh.
Hi, everybody. I am Brooks Rainey. I have already been introduced, so I don't need to go there. I have been lobbying at the North Carolina General Assembly for the Southern Environmental Law Center this is my 14th session that just started last week. And it has been really it's very disheartening and just kind of wild to see how this legislature has pulled power to themselves. They have taken power from local governments and they have taken power from the executive branch. And they've done it incrementally, but over the years, what we've seen is a huge shifting of power that disrupts the balance that we're supposed to have because of the separation of powers in our Constitution. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about how the legislature hijacked environmental regulations in North Carolina. So next slide. So I'm a wonk. I'm very wonky. I draft bills, I draft amendments. And in case you're not a wonk, here's a couple of things you might not know. The difference in a statute and a regulation. So when the legislature passes a bill, that language of that bill goes into statute. That changes the statute. And then a rulemaking body creates the rules that implement the statute. So the statute might say broadly what's going to happen, and then a board or a commission will come back and detail exactly how that's going to happen. And the reason we do that is because the legislature in North Carolina is a volunteer legislature. They're veterinarians and clothing salesmen and lawyers and doctors, and they don't have the subject matter expertise to really detail how these things should play out on the ground. But more and more, they're acting like they do, and they'll prescribe in the statute exactly what the rule is going to say. And it's really not supposed to be like that. Another way that they're taking over, besides just being really prescriptive in the statute, is that they're shifting authority. So the rulemaking body a lot of you guys are at the coast. One of your important rulemaking bodies out there is the Coastal Resource Commission. But a lot of environmental laws in North Carolina, the rulemaking is done by a body called the Environmental Management Commission, and they are housed inside the Department of Environmental Quality. So next slide. So for many, many years, for decades, for most of North Carolina's history, whoever was governor and controlled the executive branch controlled the agencies and therefore controlled the rulemaking bodies within the agencies. So you might have a Republican legislature, but the rulemaking body was mostly appointed by a Democratic governor or vice versa. Well, in 2023, a bill went through the General Assembly. We called it Senate Bill 512 until it passed. And then it was Session Law 2023-136. And it gave the Republican Party a majority appointment power on a bunch of boards and commissions: DOT, CRC, EMC, Board of Elections, they just threw all the spaghetti at the wall and appointed members to different committees in different ways to see what would stick in the courts. Governor Cooper vetoed this bill, saying it was just a usurpation of executive power in violation of the separation of powers clause in the Constitution. And it passed over his veto. One of the things it does is reduced the number of governor appointees to the EMC and instead shifted those two appointments to the Commissioner of Agriculture. Well, the Commissioner of Agriculture is Steve Troxler, and he's also a Republican. So they were kind of tricky. They're like, we're not going to give ourselves the appointment power. We're going to keep it in the executive, but we're going to house it in an executive that is still Republican. So what it did was shifted the power of the EMC from a Democratic majority to a Republican majority. Next slide. And little side note, Department of Agriculture is a really bad fit for the EMC. Agricultural rules in America pretty much are done with carrots. You know, we're going to pay you, we're going to pay the farmers to follow these rules, whereas environmental regulations are carrots and sticks. And so these agricultural board members who are suddenly on the EMC are really out of their depth. They don't really know the subject matter. It's a completely different dynamic than agricultural. It's just a bad fit. When the governor sued on Session Law 2023-136, some boards and commissions were struck down as unconstitutional. The EMC was not. The court said that because the majority of appointees were still within the control of the executive branch, it does not violate the separation of powers. I disagree. A lot of people disagree. So another thing that that bill did is it seized the governor's ability to appoint the chair of the Environmental Management Commission. It also changed his power to remove commissioners. So if someone is committing like misfeasance or malfeasance, these are fun legal words, or nonfeasance, if they're just not doing their job, he can't get rid of them anymore. So it pulled a lot of power from the governor over this board. So this new appointments to the EMC became effective in October 2023, which was really bad timing for those of us fighting PFAS, because up until that point, we had been moving towards surface water standards at the EMC, and then that just stopped. This new Republican majority at the EMC quickly started kowtowing to the industry. So next slide. So put a pin in that dynamic. Let's remember that the EMC has been hijacked. A couple of years later, the legislature has this next brilliant idea. This idea is being pushed for Americans for Prosperity. It's being pushed nationwide, and it's called the RAINS Act. And what the RAINS Act does is it tries to limit rules that are expensive for industry. So any rule that has a substantial cost, that would cost industry a lot, now has like heightened levels of scrutiny to get passed. And it makes it just about impossible. So in North Carolina, our version of the RAINS Act, and this also became law over the governor's veto. We've had some really problematic defections on veto votes from the minority party, Democrats crossing to vote with Republicans on veto overrides. You've probably seen in the news that the members who did that all lost their primaries. So that's good that there are repercussions for that, because the RAINS Act really is a terrible thing. Any bill that imposes a financial burden on the regulated community, if it's a cost of $10 million or more over 5 years, so $2 million a year, that's really not very much when we're talking about pollution control. Or if a bill has that impact, it would have to have 2/3 of all the board voting together. And if it has over, let me make sure I don't get this wrong. If it has over 20 million or more over a 5-year period, there has to be a unanimous vote. Well, I just told you what's happened to this board. They couldn't get a unanimous vote on whether to have ice cream or pizza for lunch. Like, they cannot vote unanimously. Every vote goes down on party lines. And so any bill that is expensive to industry, or any rule rather, that's expensive to industry, now is just going to get stopped. It just takes one vote to stop it. Well, sometimes this works in our favor. if there's a bad environmental rule going through, it might be nice to be able to stop it with one vote. I'll come back to how they're not going to let us do that. Next slide. I get really excited talking about legislation. A really awful thing that this bill did is it completely took benefits out of a cost benefit analysis, which is just insane. It's going to be expensive to keep pollutants out of our environment. The cheapest thing is always going to be to dump your waste stream into the water or into a pit in the ground. It's just always going to be expensive to not poison your neighbors. But that's why we have a cost benefit analysis. As an example, the PFAS rule, the surface water standards that we didn't get, that we would have gotten if things hadn't shifted, would have provided $276 million annually in health benefits. And it would have cost industry $263 million. So we had a $13 million benefit above the cost to industry. And you can look at that rule and say, oh yeah, this is worth it. When you take the benefits out, it just looks like a crazy expensive rule for industry. And industry can say, oh, well, we're going to be run out of town and, we're not going to be able to operate in North Carolina and the economy will collapse and the sky will fall. And of course, we know that wouldn't happen. In other states where industry is required to not pollute to the degree that they're allowed to in North Carolina, industry finds a way to abide by the law. So the RAINS Act has made it really difficult for strong science-based rules to get passed. And we know that rules that are designed to protect water can be expensive, but they also come with a lot of benefits. So, given the changes in the makeup of the EMC and the negative position that many of the commissioners have taken on adopting rules that protect people over profit, it's unlikely that we're going to see a unanimous vote for strong water quality standards in the near future. As SELC's lobbyist, I'm taking that message into the legislative building and saying, well, you've made it so you're the only ones who can do this. So let's see what you're going to do. We can't get the rulemaking to fix this. You're going to have to do it through statute. And just to expose their blatant hypocrisy around this, 3 months after the RAINS Act went into effect, there was a rule that industry wanted going through the EMC that would allow dumping what they call highly treated wastewater into swamps, basically just discharging into swamps. And because they didn't want their new, very important RAINS Act to stop it, they passed a law exempting that rule from the RAINS Act. So now we see what they're going to do. They're going to allow the rules to go through that they want to, and they're going to exempt the rules, require the RAINS Act for the rules they don't want to go through. Next slide, please. So I'm about to turn this over to Erin. So I'm going to tee up what she's going to talk to you about, which is these new rules. So let me give you a little brief history. I know nothing about this book, but I loved the title and the picture, so I put it there. No idea if it's good or not. If somebody wants to read it and get back to me, that's great. But basically, humans are overrun with power and greed here when we're talking environmental policy. So a little background on these PFAS rules. At the agency level, at DEQ, they've been trying to get surface water standards since at least 2023. The department went through all the necessary steps. They collected all of the data. They responded to questions from the EMC. They had a fiscal note, which we call a regulatory impact analysis. And it all made it really clear that water quality standards for PFAS was really important for North Carolinians. It was going to save us millions of dollars in avoided health impacts, unnecessary death, property value loss, and cost to water treatment plants. But then the power shifted, and in September 2024, the EMC's Water Quality Committee blocked those rules and instead started pushing forward this idea of monitoring and minimization that Erin's going to talk more about. They did that for PFAS, and then they did that for 1,4-dioxane, and those rules are moving through now. Would they trigger the RAINS Act? They sure would. And so I'm working at the legislature to watch for a provision slipped into a bill that would exempt this from the RAINS Act. Otherwise, we'll try to get the bills killed that way, or the rules killed that way. Sorry. And I'll hand it over to Erin.
Thank you, Brooks. Thank you for that background. I'll wait till my slide comes up here before I start. I can start by introducing myself. I'm Erin Carey. I am the Deputy Director of the North Carolina Sierra Club, um, as well as our conservation lead, policy lead. And I'm going to take some of the information that Brooks just gave us and sort of hone in on how this power shift has played out in rulemaking currently as it relates to 1,4-dioxane and PFAS in surface water. And towards the end of my presentation, we're going to talk about how we can use our collective power to push back against this power grab at the legislature. Oh, next slide, Kate. So I just want to do a brief overview of these chemicals. If you are unfamiliar or you've never heard of PFAS, they are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're called forever chemicals because they stay around forever. They do not break down in the environment, and they will be here long after we're gone, unfortunately. So they're used for a lot of things that are really handy. They resist water, grease, and heat. And so you can imagine they're found in a lot of things that we use every day, nonstick cookware, waterproof fabrics like your raincoat, stain-resistant carpeting, anything that's stain-resistant in your house or in your car has PFAS in it. Food packaging, unfortunately, like what your hamburgers wrapped in or what your fries come in, when the grease doesn't soak through it, it's because of PFAS. So these are ubiquitous chemicals. And they are everywhere. So exposure to them is not great. It can cause increased cholesterol, liver damage, low birth weight, and risks of kidney or testicular cancers. Um, and this is probably an important point to make. So when we talk about chemicals today, PFAS is a class of chemicals. There are over 14,000 chemicals identified and logged with the EPA currently, although there are estimates there are far more than that internationally. So it's a lot to keep track of. Advocates are looking to control them as a class. But just remember that when I talk about PFAS, I'm talking about multiple substances. Next slide, Kate. 1,4-dioxane, however, is all on its own. It is a single chemical that's an industrial solvent. And sometimes we get it as a byproduct of manufacturing PET plastics, which happens a lot here in North Carolina. The EPA has classified the chemicals as a likely human carcinogen, and that's as close as the EPA gets to telling you that something's going to cause cancer, because we can't ethically test humans. So when the EPA says it's a likely human carcinogen, it is a likely human carcinogen. Long-term exposure may cause cancer, but can also damage the liver and kidneys. And 1,4-dioxane is currently in most of our drinking water. It's come into the news lately because the city of Asheboro is trying desperately to dump as much as this stuff into the river as they can legally, um, and which has caused some interesting discussions in the news and among politicians. But North Carolina has some of the worst 1,4-dioxane pollution because of situations like this of unchecked discharge into surface waters. And in fact, North Carolinians, depending on where you live, you may have exposure that's up to twice what the average American gets. Next slide, please. So Brooks talked about this power grab and mentioned the PFAS I'm sorry, the PFAS rules that DEQ was moving forward in 2024. And so, as she mentioned, they were health-based surface water standards. The DEQ staff went into the research, they went into journals, they figured out what that level needed to be in order to be safe for human consumption. The rules covered 8 PFAS chemicals, which I understand next to 14,000 seems like not that many, but these were the most abundant PFAS found in North Carolina surface waters, and that's how they chose them. The rules set numeric water quality limits. This is very important because you'll see that this is missing later. and which force polluters to meet specific discharge limits, right? So if they have a limit in their permit, then they have to meet that limit or suffer consequences. So in that way, it functioned like traditional Clean Water Act standards in that they were held accountable if their discharges were higher than their permit allowed. Next slide, Kate. So, um, so as as this power shift was happening in the EMC and the governor's selections were replaced by industry loyalists and anti-regulatory folks. The companies that they took notice, companies and trade groups took notice and used this new power to push back on the strong limits that DEQ was trying to advance to protect North Carolinians. They said it'll be too expensive to implement, of course. And this is at the same time they're reporting, billions of dollars in revenue to their shareholders. But yes, too expensive. They asked for more time, more studies, and they definitely didn't want all 8 of those chemicals covered. That seemed way too much in their mind. And before I go any further, I do want to be clear on this because I'm about to say that they're ridiculous for asking more time and more studies, which is true. But we do need to study PFAS. I am not at all saying that we don't need to study PFAS. It's everywhere. It's in all of our blood. We need to understand the impacts it has on human health and the environment. However, we can study it and turn it off at the source. We can stop poisoning people and study PFAS. This is not an either or situation. It is sold that way many times. But we can cut off the source and still study the chemical. So I just want to be clear. I'm not saying we shouldn't study it. I'm just saying we need to stop poisoning people first. So anyway, the EMC leadership wasn't super shy about their new position or who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. In fact, in a public meeting, the Water Quality Committee chair told DEQ that the North Carolina Water Quality Association, which is a group of wastewater utilities, like whose members are some of the biggest polluters of these chemicals, that they had written 80% of the rule and that DEQ just needed to fill in the blanks. So essentially, I guess name, address, date, whatever, everything else was all filled in for them. They didn't have to worry about it because this group had written them. And this, of course, is a huge shift in how we do policy and how we do regulation. Next slide, please, Kate. So as a result of industry leaning on the EMC and the EMC being very willing to be leaned on, the EMC ended up rejecting DEQ's approach, that approach of actually setting numerical limits and caring about human health and all that. And they directed a very different rule. This one that was 80% of it was written by industry representatives. So they cut the number of chemicals just like they wanted. They reduced them from 8 PFAS to just 3, including PFOA, PFOS, and Gen X. I will pause because it's important to understand that PFOA and PFOS are not manufactured in the United States anymore. They were phased out due to their high toxicity. And so regulating 2 compounds, excuse me, that are no longer being manufactured is, I don't know, terrible, a waste, misleading, lots of things, but helpful is not one of those things. Gen X, of course, is the proprietary PFAS that Chemours in the Fayetteville Works discharged into the Cape Fear River. So that one's great, but the other 2, we don't manufacture it, so paying attention to it doesn't make any sense. The new rules or the new plan eliminated numeric limits, meaning that there was no numeric limits. They could put as much in the water as they wanted to. They dropped all health-based surface water standards, so all of the research that had been used to create those original standards was dismissed, and there were no enforceable concentration caps for PFAS. So no matter how bad this pollution got, there was nothing the state could do about it. Next slide. The proposed M&M rules. So these are the rules that are currently open for public comment. M&M is monitoring and minimization. And the essence of these rules is that the industry basically gets to regulate itself. According to these plans, the polluter must test their wastewater, which sounds good. That sounds like something one should have to do, but they only have to do it 4 times a year. They don't have to do it quarterly. Um, and they have to create plans to reduce pollution in the event that pollution gets a little high. I don't know. There's no numbers associated with this, so I'm not sure what triggers it. But at some point, they will have to create a plan to reduce pollution. The rub there is that they don't actually have to follow the plan. It is a, will you please create a plan and tell us what you might do to reduce pollution if you ever felt like that was something you needed to do? So they write this plan, it gets stuck on a hard drive or a shelf somewhere. They don't have to follow it. There's no required reduction levels. It is madness. And finally, there's no real enforcement mechanism. This it's not a treatment rule. It does not require a reduction or pollution cuts. So these rules, even though they're called monitoring and minimization, do neither of those things. There's no requirement for reducing your impact or reducing your discharges. And we all know that allowing industry to regulate itself doesn't work. It's why DEQ exists. It's why the EMC exists. It's what they're supposed to do, is they're supposed to protect the people of North Carolina and the environment from industry. Next slide. So now we talk about how we fight back. It can be very discouraging and sad to watch these things happen in our state. It can make you feel helpless. But no matter how much power is grabbed or taken from the governor, no matter how much power the EMC thinks they have, they can't do this without hearing us first. So that's what we need to do. We need to be heard. The public comment period for the M&M rules for 1,4-dioxane and for PFAS runs through June 15th. The easiest way at this point to submit a comment is through our petition, which you can get through this QR code. So if you just open your camera on your phone, put it in the screen and press the little yellow button, it should take you to our action alert. If you'd like to submit an email, if you don't want to do our action alert, the EMC has managed to make this as difficult as possible for people to engage. So this is what you have to do. There are the comment periods are concurrent, but they're separate. So they're running at the same time, but you can't make one comment for both sets of rules, even though they are almost identical. So what you have to do is you email public comments at deq.nc.gov, and you'll send 2 emails. The first one, the subject line will say 1,4-dioxane monitoring and minimization rules. You send that. And then you have a copy of the email you just sent, and you put in the subject line PFAS monitoring and minimization rules. So that way you will be commenting on both sets of rules and you'll be counted twice. If you'd like to go old school and you'd like to send in a letter or a postcard, there is the mailing address. But the question may be like, what do we need to tell the EMC? I mean, what do we need to say in these comments? And I would say talk about how this impacts you personally. Talk about how it impacts your family. Tell them that we need strong regulations, that we need accountability and enforcement, that we need people to be prioritized over industry profits. We need numbers to work off of. We need actual limits. And I don't know. This has been, I think, for those of us who work on this issue, this has been a very, very frustrating fight. And so we really appreciate you all being here today and engaging in this process, because we really do want the EMC to know that they can't do this behind our back and that people are paying attention. So please tell your friends, share this QR code. I believe this presentation is being recorded and you'll be sent a link so you can share it through that. You can also go to the North Carolina Sierra Club website and it will be there. But please share broadly. make them hear us. And that's all I have. Well, I guess I'll say if you do have any questions, anyway, if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to help with comments. I'm happy to answer questions that may not get addressed today. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I think we have one question in the chat right now. I'm gonna go ahead and shorten it a little bit just to summarize it. But the question is why are we using the language PFAS chemicals as an umbrella term for forever chemicals? Why are we using this language as opposed to forever chemicals?
Well, they're interchangeable. PFAS is just like the official, it's per and polyfluoroalkyl, which is hard to say. And so PFAS is just an abbreviation for that, but forever chemicals refers to all PFAS because they don't, and it's honestly it's kind of a marketing thing too, or it helps in advocacy to tell people that they're dealing with forever chemicals. It leaves an impact, but it's also true.
And
Yeah.
there
Does that
there
answer
are
the
so
question?
many of them. And to the comment in the comments, which I love for the environmental chemist, there are so many. And when they've narrowed this rule so much to only require reporting of a very, very few, when they run these samples, they get the results of many, many more. And we're going to require them to do more work to redact all but these three. And we brought that up over and over again as this went through the process. Like, you're putting a bigger burden on industry by not having them just go ahead and report everything. And they twisted themselves into knots to make the argument that they just need these three, which is just wild.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing another question in the chat. It's are any PFAS chemicals beneficial and non-toxic?
I don't know. If we have an environmental chemist in the chat, do we
Really
have an
beneficial
environmental
for
chemist in the chat?
nonstick.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say no, just because of the structure of the molecules. I mean, they vary a tiny, tiny little bit, but not meaningfully across the class of chemicals. But I am absolutely not an environmental chemist, and but that would be my guess if I had to guess. Again, not an environmental chemist, but maybe that person can let us know in the chat.
And I don't think any of them are beneficial for humans or the environment. They are very effective at what they do, which is why they're
Hmm.
everywhere, stain
Yeah.
resistant and nonstick. And I mean, they're everywhere. It's in everything. So they are very good at what they do, but I don't think any of them are good for humans or the environment.
Remember, folks, you can leave your questions in our Q&A function. That's at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, I think this is a comment, but I have someone who said, I'm shocked to learn that PFAS chemicals are in our water supply and in our bodies. Um,
I think that's not uncommon. I mean, certainly PFAS and 1,4-dioxane have been in the news more in the last year or so than they ever have been. And I think there's a little more awareness out there, but you wouldn't be surprised because you are I was gonna say you'd be surprised at how many people we talk to who have no idea, but we live and breathe this every day. And so to us it's common knowledge, but we understand that people are living their lives, they're very busy, and this isn't necessarily something they're paying attention to. But yeah, in our water, in our bodies, and they could be stopped if our government decided that that's something that they would want to do.
yeah, we also had another question where someone asked, by when do we need to do this? And I believe that's referring to the comment periods.
Yeah, the comment period runs through June 15th. So it's been a 90-day comment period, which is really nice, actually. It was more than we were expecting. There were 6 public hearings held across the state. Oh, there's one more in May. Um, to gather public comment. We just had one in Wilmington last week. There were over 200 people who attended. And so this has been, once people learn what's happening, they get very vocal about it. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, make sure you're heard.
And for the question about filtration, yes, granular activated carbon and reverse osmosis can remove PFAS from water. Um, it's very expensive if you do it at the water treatment level. Water treatment plants have the authority, it's called pre-treatment authority, to require that upstream industries not put it into their waste stream. If a water treatment plant is taking in something that they can't deal with, they're allowed to tell the people upstream to stop. They're hesitant to do it because it's industry and nobody wants to stymie economy in their area. They don't mind stymieing environmental protection.
Yeah.
So we've really been trying to push for that. In fact, there's a bill at the legislature now that would require that pretreatment authority be used. There was a hearing at the legislature yesterday about sludge, because at wastewater treatment plants, the sludge, the resulting byproduct, is full of PFAS because they're not getting it out. And then they spread it on farms, and we're finding that agricultural land has really high levels of PFAS. And like children who grow up on farms have way more in their bodies. So we're starting to get the agricultural community more concerned. With the rise of RFK, we've seen the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. That movement's getting very concerned. So it's becoming less partisan. And I do think we're going to start to see more action on PFAS. We're just at a very low point right now. And right now, we just need to stop things from getting worse so we can start building toward a better solution. That was kind of a
And I
rant
will say
for
too,
a TED Talk.
is yeah, I will say too that 1,4-dioxane is very difficult to get out of drinking water. For those of you who aren't familiar, Cape Fear Public Utility, who treats water for the Wilmington, basically the Cape Fear region, had to upgrade their facility a couple years ago because of the Gen X contamination. Despite tens of millions of dollars of improved infrastructure and filtration, they cannot pull 1,4-dioxane out of the water with this advanced filtration. So it's really much easier for them to just not dump it in the water to begin with than try to get it out.
And the question about I'm sorry if I'm taking over your job, Neha. There was a
No, you're
question
fine.
about
I
polluter
was
pays.
gonna.
And I'm not sure I understood the question fully, but that is something we are always pushing for. Industry should be paying to keep it out of our water. We shouldn't be paying higher water bills for the honor of not being poisoned. You know, it should be the industry that's paying for it. And there was a question about the biggest offenders. The Chemours plant is a big one. DuPont. Why can't I think of the name of the 5M? Is it that was the 3M? The ones that make like
3M, 3M,
tape and
yeah,
stuff. A Scotch
yeah.
Guard. But the number of companies that produce this as a byproduct, it's very large. Furniture companies, it's on upholstery, the carpet industry. So it's kind of everywhere. I'll let Erin take the 1,4-dioxane question. I don't know.
Oh, 1,4-dioxane, it's an industrial solvent. So it's clear and it's very good at what it does. But yeah, it's a solvent and it's also a byproduct. I think I mentioned this for the manufacture of PET chemicals. Um, PET plastics.
What do they do with it when they get it out? I mean, same as any dangerous byproduct. I think the safest is put that byproduct in a lined landfill. That's probably the best we can do right now. But industry has disposal methods. I don't know exactly what they are. I do know, for example, Chemours was shipping a lot of their waste to a landfill in Robeson County that was problematic, and a landfill in Sanford County. So it is a cradle to grave problem. If we solve it here, we have to figure out where it's going next and who it's harming. And a lot of times the disposal sites are in poorer communities or communities of color. And so then it's an environmental justice issue. And our work is really never done.
All right. I think we've had a few questions that we've kind of jumped around here and there, but I believe I don't actually I'm not sure which ones we've answered.
Okay, I see one. Someone asked if we should be working to stop purchasing PFAS. Um, well, the short answer is yes. But the longer answer is yes, but it's going to be very difficult. It takes a lot of research to find PFAS free anything really. But those products exist out there. But this is also this is a justice issue as well because Patagonia has a line of PFAS free clothing now, but Patagonia, not everybody can go out and buy Patagonia clothing. So there's definitely an access issue where you shouldn't be blocked from being able to purchase chemical free products because you don't make enough money to do that. And so that's part of the problem too, is some people can get under sink RO filters, reverse osmosis filters. Some people can afford that, but most people can't. And that's a huge problem that we deal with every day as well. A huge question. How do we make safety accessible to everyone?
The mom, I bought a new couch recently, and I just asked the company a lot of questions about the upholstery, and I was able to get it without PFAS in it, and it was not cheap. But there's a program called Mind the Store that works to get bad products out by putting pressure campaigns on retailers. There was a big campaign against Lowe's to try to get them to stop carrying carpet with PFAS, and it was successful. There was a big campaign they did at REI to get them to stop carrying PFAS, um, things with PFAS in them. But it's a very like one at a time. It's not, there's not yet an effort that would just get it out of everything. It's up to the consumer.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
see a question from John. John, how can we encourage an environmentally responsible chemical industry? Well, that is a question. I think what we can do is we can punish polluters, like actually punish polluters, because if we punish polluters, then bad actors leave, which is what we're always threatened with, right? Well, if we fine them, then they'll go away and we'll lose jobs. But what happens is good industry then comes in, like because if our state shares a moral compass with an industry or with a company, that company is going to want to be in North Carolina. Letting anybody do whatever they want to our drinking water is not working, one, and does not attract good actors. It attracts bad actors. So I think this is a systemic problem that we need to start looking at differently, and that starts with our decision makers, um, and even the governor.
And I think if we make it more expensive for the industry, they'll find other solutions. I mean, they created these chemicals. Maybe they could create chemicals that aren't poisoning people. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, many of these chemicals are banned in Europe. Many PFAS are banned in Europe. So it's not that industry just comes to a screeching halt if they're not available. Industry will find a way. We just have to make them.
Alrighty, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If y'all still have more, go ahead and feel free to drop them in. Is there anything else, Brooks or Erin, that you wanted to add around this issue as we've had some of these questions come up?
I'm just so grateful that you guys are listening and concerned and wanting to learn more about it. It's so important, and it's what I spend my days doing, and I'm happy to share it, and I'm really happy to have been invited to be here.
Yes, it's very heartening to see so many folks interested. So please really do spread the word. The more the EMC hears from us, the harder it is for them to make bad decisions, even if they feel very empowered to do so by the legislature. So the media has picked up on this, and this backlash as well. So please, let's just keep beating the drum, keep letting them know, and share as far and wide as you can. I think that's it now, for me at least.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I think unless someone wants to leave one now. Oh, actually, one more. Paul Kelly has asked, why has this information not been distributed more widely?
Um, hmm. So the information, I guess the information about contamination, I think that's it's kind of region specific because I live in Wilmington and so the contamination of the Cape Fear River has been a fairly well-known thing. Um, but PFAS is everywhere, as I mentioned, and people are starting to discover that it's everywhere. And so I think it's starting to get out more and more. It just hasn't reached sort of the fever pitch that it did in the Cape Fear River Basin when we found out our drinking water was being poisoned for 30 years. And it's the same with 1,4-dioxane. So once people know, they get really upset and they start getting really loud. So what we're trying to do here is get that information out and ask you to help us get that information out because it's really important that people understand the risks and the power they have to help stop what's happening.
We have another question. John asked, hasn't there been a mixed message somewhat, i.e., we've been led to believe that the PFAS problem has been solved?
Um,
Yes. Right.
I was just going to say, I think if you're talking, John, if you're talking about Wilmington and you're talking about Cape Fear Public Utility being able to pull PFAS out of the water, yes. And that was their messaging. And they're right. I mean, they've done a very good job. They've spent millions and millions, millions of dollars that we are now paying for to pull this stuff out of our water. And for the most part, they've been largely successful. We can talk about breakthrough and super short chains if you want to, but largely we're way better off than we were. But as Brooks said, this is the cradle to grave problem. So when they pull PFAS out of our water, they send it up to New York and put it in a deep injection well, so it becomes somebody else's problem. Um, so the problem doesn't go away. The PFAS might shift and be somewhere else. But I understand what you're saying. It is easy to believe that we don't have anything to worry about when you see those ads, but um, as Brooks said, it's in our food, it's on our farms, it's everywhere.
We have another question from John Crystal. Is there not a list of outdoor clothing that does not contain PFAS?
I don't know of one, but I do
Yeah.
know that companies that are creating PFAS-free um, gear are very loud about it because it is very expensive.
Yeah.
So if you're wondering if it has PFAS in it because you haven't seen anything otherwise, it probably does. Um, yeah, the companies that are creating these clothing lines and this gear are very vocal
Mhm.
about it being PFAS free.
Yeah. Often before I
So
buy
you could probably just
anything,
Google it.
I Google PFAS free, whatever I'm looking for.
Yeah.
It's sneaky. It's in a lot of things.
Jean, if you can submit two comments either by if you go to our action alert and sign on to our petition, that will submit it twice for you, or if you want to do it yourself. You'll take the email address that was on my penultimate slide, the second to last slide. Um, and you can use the same comments just with different subject headings. So one would be PFAS minimization rules, and then the second subject line would be 1,4-dioxane minimization rules.
Gail asked, what is the best way to share with others? I'll go ahead and say that the North Carolina Sierra Club, we've got a petition up, so that might be sharing that link out might be the easiest way to share with other people. We also have a couple graphics up on our social medias to help get the word out. But I would say sharing that link would probably be the easiest way. If
If
you have
you're on social media, I'm sure Sierra Club does. SELC has posts about this that link to our comment submission form and more information. So that's always a good way to follow what we're up to.
And talk to your friends. I mean, just have these conversations with folks. You weren't the only one who didn't know if you didn't know coming in. And so the more you can share the information, the more empowered we are.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that and say I think a lot of people with these forever chemicals, they don't really know where to start with it or how to engage with it or even understand what they should know about this. So I think it's really helpful to just start having those conversations just so you can really dig in and explain what these rules are. It's intentionally complicated, is what I've learned through engaging on this issue.
Also intentionally weak.
Um, I see two more comments in the chat. Susan said, "I feel like it's not real to many people unless it hits us in a proven way. Like, I.e., is an illness that was caused by it. We can't see these chemicals." I think that's absolutely right. And Gail said, "Do you mean to spread is just to talk and tell others?" I would definitely direct them to take action on it, which is submitting those comments as we've talked about. Whether you choose to do our petition, SELC's got some stuff too, I'm aware, and or you can directly mail them, email them, whatever you think is best. But make sure that I would inform folks and then ask them to take action, whatever that looks like. Alrighty, I think we'll hang out here for a few more minutes, but I think that's the end of our webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Melissa, I see your question in the chat here. Erin, do you see that?
Yeah, I'm reading
Okay.
it. Okay, that's a big question. Listen, all right, so let's start with the first one. Yes, I see a future where emerging contaminants are taken seriously, but we need new leaders and we need to get money out of politics. So if we can do something with those two very small things, then we should be able to make big changes. But I do think there's hope, but it's just going to take like systematic change. Is the way to have the polluters regulating themselves completely intractable? I'm not sure that I understand the question. But well, if they're only regulating themselves um if these plans or if these rules pass. If they don't, then we have a chance to hold industry accountable and to set numeric limits. And then do you have any examples of effective policy? So in Europe and actually in many other countries, it's I cannot now. I'm not gonna be able to think of it. It's a principle, and I'm so sorry I can't think of it. But generally, the idea is the presumption of a chemical is that it's going to do damage until the company can prove otherwise. Where here we let the chemical into the environment and then won't take it out until somebody proves that it's dangerous. So yeah, we've got it backwards. We're doing it wrong. Now it's going to bother me that I can't remember what it is. I don't even know how to Google it. I don't know. Yeah, we definitely have It's why PFAS is banned in parts of Europe. It's because of I had it on the tip. I almost said it. The something principle. Um, precautionary principle. That's what it is. Precautionary principle. And so yeah. So generally speaking, you have to prove it's not going to hurt anybody before we'll let you do it. And so we have a model. It's just that we have a lot of money in politics, and industry has a lot of money that they put into politics, and that tends to sway things dramatically.
Well, thank you for your question, Alyssa. I think we're good to wrap now. I think we're in good
Okay.
attendance.
Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you so much for attending. And again, if you still have a question, feel free to email us.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye all.
Bye.